I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Welcome back to Focus Today. Bryan Platt joins us. He wears many different hats, but the one that he wears the most of the time is the guy who is in charge of making sure that we know what's going on the abortion front. And what group is it you actually represent?
Well, Jackson County Right to Life.
Yeah. And that's it then. That's the big umbrella of
that. Well, locally, and then we have Oregon Right to Life, which is our
part of that too.
Our mother affiliation, whatever. Yeah.
All right, let's talk. We've been having a whole series now of issues about what we might be able to expect with the Trump presidency and how things can change. Now, let's put it in reality. This is a Supreme Court ruling that allowed abortion to occur. What can a Trump presidency do, and what are you expecting him to do in any regard to abortion?
There are a lot of different things. I think we have a graphic slide that we can put on the screen, Steve.
Okay.
But let's start with the Supreme Court, because that's the biggie everybody thinks about.
There is an open seat,
and there is an open seat. He can fill it. He can make that nomination. Judicial appointments need just a simple majority of approval in the Senate in their advise and consent role. Okay, so the Supreme Court justices is number one, and we have not only Anton Scalia's vacancy, which is just hanging out there right now ready to go, but we also have 3 other Supreme Court judges that are about 80 years old, starting with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's 83 and frankly looks frail. So again, one of the issues is, well, we don't have a supermajority, a cloture invoking 60-member Senate, but we don't need that for judicial appointments. And did you know there are about 5,000 federal judicial appointments nationwide, which the president routinely is asked to replace judicial positions during the course of his tenure. And that affects all the federal courts, from the district courts, like we have District 9 down in San Francisco, all across the United States, and then lower federal courts. So it's a huge opportunity for us to begin to change the culture by having President Trump appoint federal nominees who, again, are constitutionalists. So it's a big deal.
And they have to uphold the law, though the Supreme Court has already passed. So let me ask you this. We have seen this before occur where, in fact, the Supreme Court, for example, they had endorsed slaves at one point, and then they came back and changed it. Could we possibly see something like this with abortion, or is that stretching that too far?
No, I don't think so at all, because there's a law concept called stare decisis, and you can Google it. I mean, I'm no expert, but stare decisis says the emphasis is not on previous rulings, Supreme Court or court rulings. It's on what the Constitution says. It's what the law says. So in other words, Lawrence Tribe from Harvard said that Roe v. Wade was not constitutionally valid. Okay, sure, the Supreme Court made it the law of the land, but there wasn't any, so someone like him made a statement that there was no basis in the Constitution. So they can invoke that concept called stare decisis and overturn Roe v. Wade, even though it has been for 40-some years the law of the land. So yeah, very much so.
I tend to think that we look at this as historical things. Yeah, in the past they changed their mind and changed the law, but it wouldn't happen with something like this. It sounds like you actually think something like this could happen.
I just think that, it's regarded as very poor law. There was an agenda back then. I've read books about Harry Blackmun and the decision-making process that they went through in 1973, and it was primarily his clerks who advised him on how to write this and come up with this penumbra, thing. I mean, all this nonsense that wasn't anywhere to be found in the United States Constitution. So I think it's very vulnerable. Now, having said that, replacing Anton Scalia with another Scalia-type individual is not going to get the job done, because I don't believe Anthony Kennedy is prepared to overturn Roe. I think we're still one of the 4 clear liberals or a Justice Kennedy away from having the right mix in place there to revisit it. Then we also need the case. Okay, we need the case, that would be focused enough to address the issues raised in Roe or Doe Bolton, because it's kind of was a match.
Yeah.
Those two decisions were made the same day, and together they created this abortion on demand thing. So there's a ways to go, but the possibility is there.
Well, so all right, let's see. We have one seat already that has to be filled.
Has to be filled.
And you're saying 3 others that could be filled within the next 4
Well,
years.
just
So
based on age, based on their age.
So we have 4 potential appointees that Donald Trump could make.
Huge.
Now, we were talking about during the election why this is such an important thing to decide who you want to be president because of that factor. Alone, without anything else, the Supreme Court issue. I don't know that 4 Supreme Court justices, that's a huge influence to have. And how many of those that you're targeting are considered liberal?
2 of those 3 that are in the 80-year area, Ginsburg and Souter, being the 2 liberals, are potential.
Okay. Well, that could change the face dramatically.
I mean, it's a generational thing, Steve. It's so significant. I just, it's something to contemplate.
After years of kind of fighting behind the scenes and seeing how the laws have not gone the way that you would like to, it sounds to me like you're pretty optimistic about what might happen.
I am very optimistic, and you know there are attorneys, there are cases out there that are kind of waiting in the wings for an opportunity like this.
Really?
Yeah. And so I don't think you'll see anything immediately. Obviously, replacing Scalia with a Scalia-like justice doesn't get the job done. We still need another vacancy, particularly with one of the liberals, the 4 liberals. And then the stage may be set for approaching that. Yeah. So, and you know, we have 4 years to look at that right now as a minimum.
Now, you said a case would have to come up, like a Roe versus Wade in that one that changed that law. Do you think that's going to be hard to come up with a case that could change the abortion situation?
I think they're sitting there waiting right now.
Yeah. And any idea how they would be approached? What would be the issue we would be dealing with, that the court would be dealing with?
Well, I mean, the whole thing is based on a woman's right of privacy.
Right.
I think that's what it is.
Right.
So how that's phrased in legalese, I have no idea. I mean, I honestly
But you think that's where the tone of it would move
undoubtedly,
that way?
between, you know, the American Center for Law and Justice, National Right to Life, you know, I mean, just there's so many organizations that are totally aware of the dynamics necessary to focus the argument, because that's what it's going to have to be. It can't be a peripheral, you know, this abortion clinic isn't open enough, you know, like we went through down in Texas here. That was the last bad blow for the pro-life movement here, was a year or so ago by the Supreme Court. No, it's got to be focused, narrowly tailored, and I don't really know what that all involves. Yeah.
You know, George Soros and his group, we mentioned, they have been meeting behind closed doors to kind of, apparently it's come up with a strategy. Where does the Democratic Party go now? But I think probably also, what are some of the issues that we will be facing now, simply because we know that the Trump administration will be bringing certain people in, and we'll have certain announcements that way. Do you think that although we have a Republican Congress, that this would be a cakewalk to get the kinds of Supreme Court justices that he wants in?
You know, I mean, he's made a list. You know, whether that, now my daughter, who teaches constitutional law at Regent in Virginia, wasn't overly impressed with the list from a pro-life standpoint.
Oh, really?
She's familiar. She actually knows some of the people that were on the list. But from a standpoint of comparing it to what a Hillary Clinton list might look like, there is no comparison. And is there another perfect, you know, potential judicial appointee out there? You know, we were all, I mean, I can speak for myself at least, fairly disappointed with John Roberts and his ruling on the Affordable Care Act.
I think a lot of conservatives were. They thought he was going to go one way, and all of a sudden these kind
out of the blue. Things. I mean, just out of the blue. And the ruling was, I mean, he was literally the deciding vote in that case where we didn't think that was even an issue for him. No. So, yeah.
Fascinating. Well, let me just broaden it out. For what you're looking at, you know, we've been talking about Supreme Court justices and what we may be seeing there. What else is the pro-life movement looking at now that Trump will be taking over?
So let's go back to that slide. Okay. So, and there are a bunch of things that could be done even within President Trump's authority with executive orders. Now, obviously, the vulnerability of an executive order is the next president can, with the stroke of a pen, un-executive the executive order, which is what he's planning on doing with a bunch of Obama Obama stuff, but we have the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act, which has been around. Okay.
See if we can get that slide up.
Okay,
there
so,
you go.
so that's going to ban abortion after 20 weeks. It should be constitutional under Roe because Roe established trimesters, and each trimester gives, as you progress through the trimesters, it gives the states more flexibility in banning abortion. Okay, so that one should be doable. We have no taxpayer funding of abortion. We have the Hyde Amendment, and
that's
Mexico.
what you've been supporting in Oregon a lot.
Oh yeah,
defeated,
and we're going to get to that if we have time.
Okay.
So we have the Hyde Amendment, which is domestic, the use of federal funds domestically to fund abortion. That will be approved again. It's an ongoing thing. It could actually be codified, so we don't have to go and revisit it every year, as has been the tradition lately. Mexico City policy, same thing at the international level. Conscience protection laws, pharmacists that have a morally, a belief that they don't want to be dispensing RU-486 or whatever.
Okay.
You have Obamacare. Forcing of insurance companies to cover abortion, forcing employers to offer policies that cover abortion, forcing individuals to buy policies that cover abortion. The state of Oregon saying, well, gee whiz, we won't pay for your life-saving treatment, but here's a handful of barbiturates. You can just go ahead and kill yourself, that kind of stuff. Okay, defunding of Planned Parenthood, which is a financial issue, can be done with a simple majority in the Senate.
They tried to do it not too many months ago.
Well, the House has passed it consistently, but the Senate was a roadblock.
Are you more optimistic now?
Undoubtedly, because even had it passed the Senate, we knew that it was certainly going to be vetoed by President Obama. So now we have Mr. Trump, who has repeatedly said he wants to defund Planned Parenthood. So, and that goes, let's keep the investigations. They're accused of tax fraud. They're accused of profiting from the sale of baby body parts. Of course, Joe Bernstein was on talking about the protesters and the nonsense there where the Planned Parenthood PAC, that was a Fox News article, Steve, that just came out yesterday. Planned Parenthood was behind the solicitation for protesters on Craigslist, of all things. And it was a telephone number that went right to a Planned Parenthood affiliate. There's not even any issue of whether they weren't involved. So tax money in some fashion was being used to pay these protesters, these anti-Trump protesters. It's crazy. It's just crazy.
And you had a couple other points, or was that the list?
Well, the other thing was, are we running out here?
Yeah, we'll be running out of time. Yeah.
If we have the other slide, this came right off the Planned Parenthood website for Planned Parenthood of Southwestern Oregon. 10 outrageous attacks on Oregon women in 2016. Okay, their outrageous attacks are Oregon Republican candidates refusing to say whether they're voting for Mike Pence or not. Now, this is an outrageous thing. In other words, they're not all out opposing Mr. Trump. They're waffling and saying, I refused it. Okay, how about Colm Willis, who used to be the PAC director at Oregon Right to Life, running against Kurt Schrader? That's an outrageous attack on women. It's a fair and square race for Congressional District 5. He failed, unfortunately, but they're calling that an outrageous attack. We have the Oregon version of the ban on the use of taxpayer money to fund abortions. Okay, now we've had some efforts. So far they haven't been successful. We already have the new measure written, and it's at the Attorney General's office and at the Supreme Court for its validation of the ballot title. That's an outrageous attack on women.
Okay, I know you've got more to talk about. We'll have to let you go, and we'll get an update on you coming up. All right, we're going to continue on with talking about the whole situation of the new president and the media and how this all plays in, because a lot of the media caught flat-footed during the election. It's coming up on Focus Today.